25 years ago, the Faculty of Anaesthetists separated from the Royal Australasian College of Surgeons to form a college in their own right. This pivotal moment in our history came about because of the commitment and dedication of the board members at the time, a group of people with the energy and enthusiasm to make it happen. Dr. Peter Livingstone was the Dean of the Board of Faculty at the time, and therefore became the first president of the College of Anaesthetists. He played a pivotal role in the journey to this, the 25th anniversary of the College of Anaesthetists, and he's interviewed here by the current president of the college, Professor David Scott.
Welcome to the college, Peter, and thank you very much for giving up your time to talk with us today.
Pleasure to be here, David.
Let's start with the beginnings. You were born in Brisbane, I believe, and then grew up in that area before World War II. Can you describe that experience for us?
Yeah, Wartime Brisbane was very busy. It was a small bush sort of town, really, I guess, but it was the forward staging area for troops heading towards New Guinea for that campaign. The Brisbane River was a busy port. It was full of ships, mostly American ships, and there were lots of aeroplane movements and that sort of thing, and the city was full of American troops as well as Australian troops. So there was a big Australian camp only a few hundred metres from where I lived, and our house was full of those soldiers in the evenings having a square meal and a hot shower, for which they were very grateful, and continued to correspond with my parents for a long time afterwards.
So you continued then on to go through high school?
Yes.
And you qualified for university, and
yes.
You chose to study medicine?
Yes.
Why? What motivated you or interested you to make that choice?
I guess the overreaching factor was my father's death. He was 48 when he died, and a very unpleasant death from carcinoma of the stomach before the end of the war. I just felt that I'd like to try and do something about preventing that happening to somebody else, and my original intentions were to be a general practitioner.
You had some very important mentors throughout your early career. You've mentioned that Tess Cramond
yes.
Was very helpful. Can you describe what it was like to know her and to work with her?
Tess was an enthusiast. She was very helpful to me, but she was a very good teacher, particularly in clinical, practical anaesthesia techniques. I spent a lot of time with Tess, and she taught a lot of things about clinical anaesthesia.
So this was in her anaesthetics
Yes,
phase?
we're talking about the 1960s, the early 60s. I became an anaesthetic trainee at the end of 1961. No, the end of 1960. And then I spent 2 years in anaesthesia training in Brisbane before I came down to Melbourne.
Did Melbourne seem like a big town? Was the environment quite different?
Melbourne did seem like a big town. We enjoyed our time in Melbourne enormously, but it was a great change, and there were changes in several ways. In terms of the departments in which I worked first at the Children's Hospital, which was Greta McClellan's department, a charming lady and a very good teacher. Then I went to the Royal Women's Hospital, where Kevin McCall was an enormous help, very supportive of his staff. And then later I went to the Alfred Hospital. But the great thing about moving to a department in Melbourne was they were structured differently. The system of anaesthetic assistance that we had in Melbourne was important to us too, and the mutual respect that there was between the anaesthetist and the surgeon was very pronounced.
You mentioned you'd worked at the Alfred and did some of your training there. Robert Orton was there at the time. Did you work with him?
Robert Orton was the director of the department when I worked there, but he didn't give any anaesthetics. He was a very unwell man. He had ischemic heart disease, and I think a few years after I came back to work in Brisbane, he passed away. But he was a very strong figure in that department, and I was fortunate that he used to take me down to his office, and I'd have a personal one-on-one tutorial at least once a week from him.
The cardiac theatre was adjacent to the ward, wasn't it?
It was straight across the corridor from the ward, yes.
And was that physical relationship important for the care of the patients?
Yes, it was, because they had one room at the end of the ward where post-operative patients went to be monitored and, if necessary, ventilated.
So you qualified, and then
Yes.
you and your family returned back to Brisbane.
Yes.
Then you had a position at the Royal Brisbane and the Royal Women's Hospital. Were they separate hospitals at that stage? Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your working life when you returned as a newly qualified anaesthetist to Brisbane.
It was interesting because you could go from one sort of specialty to another, all in the process of a day. I can remember one particular day when I gave an anaesthetic for a caesarean section. The child was born with a tracheoesophageal fistula, and later that day I was involved in giving an anaesthetic to the baby. Now, that doesn't happen very often, I'm sure, but that was a broad range of activity. My specific interest was always still obstetric anaesthesia, but to get my foot in the door, so to speak, as a visiting medical officer at the hospital, I took a position of 1 day's anaesthesia for neurosurgical procedures.
You served a lot of roles through the college.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that interested you about serving in that way?
My prime purpose was to give back something that I thought I'd got from my training and from the college, or from the faculty in those days, as it was in those days, yeah.
A number of things happened during your time on council, and many of those that you were involved with significantly. First, there was a change in the college subscription plan.
Yes.
Would you like to describe what led to that and how that came about?
We found that there was not enough money for research. There's never enough money for research, but Professor Bennett, who was the treasurer for the College of Surgeons, came up with this suggestion, and I think that he got it through his work in Wesley College in Melbourne, at the school just up the road, where if you paid your subscription in advance to allow the college or the school to accumulate some interest, you got your last year for free. And the interest of that money that was invested by the college was used for research funding. Now, in those days, interest rates were considerably better than they are at the moment.
Yes, indeed.
Indeed. But there was a fair bit of angst about the introduction of it, and there was a fair bit of flack came from the fellows, and I can understand that. But we felt that at the time that the only way we were going to get research funding off the ground properly was to do it this way, because we tried asking for money and it just didn't seem to come.
Another thing which you've referred to already is the exams, and at the time you were in council, there was a decision made to overhaul the examination process. Can you tell us more about what were the limitations of the previous exam process and what changes were put in place?
The previous examination process had been in place for a long time, and I had the feeling that this needed to be validated. If it was validated, we could still keep on doing it. But I think with the advances in techniques, the advances in research and drugs and all those other sorts of things, and the techniques of examination, that we needed to look at it very closely. So I asked Gary Phillips, who was the chairman of examinations, to institute that process.
Did that go smoothly? Was that
Yes.
difficult to implement?
Yes. Gary was kind enough to take on the job, and he also got lots of advice from educational people outside the college at the time.
One of the most significant, certainly to the external eye, events which occurred during your leadership of the faculty and then college was just that the faculty turned into a college.
Mm.
And you were the transitional dean, becoming our first president.
Mm.
Can you tell us about the process which led to that change, our separation from the College of Surgeons and the formation of a new college?
Mm. We've had fellows trying to encourage us for years to form our own college. Now, whilst our relationship, and my relationship certainly with the College of Surgeons while I was there, was nothing but amicable. There were a lot of people out there, a lot of fellows out there who didn't see it that way, and they wanted us to form our own college. So we pressed ahead, and we went from incorporation and called it the Australian and New Zealand College of Anaesthetists. So,
and there was no royal in that?
There was no royal in that.
Why not? We'd come from the Royal Australasian College of Surgeons.
We had come from the College of Surgeons, but there was a fair bit of attitude around at the time that we should be leaving the royal out, and it was time for us to stand on our own feet and be an Australian and New Zealand college, which we decided in the end.
And obviously that's been successful, and maybe that wasn't evident at the start that it was going to be successful. You mentioned that the relationship with the individuals within the College of Surgeons was amicable, and externally it appeared to be straightforward. But was it a straightforward process? Were there stresses within the two organisations during the process of the separation itself, or was it a amicable divorce?
It was extremely amicable. We were able to complete this process with complete dignity on the part of both organisations, and that was very pleasing indeed.
Pain medicine is another area that emerged as a distinctive group within the college, but perhaps more complex because there were more other colleges involved with pain medicine. What were the issues in your time and shortly afterwards that you recognised associated with the development of pain medicine?
Michael Cousins was very forthright in his views about the faculty and the college having an interest in pain medicine. And he had written to me as Dean a couple of times, and we were well aware of his views about this matter. It came to a head when I received a letter from the chairman of the National Specialist Advisory Committee, who had said that he had received a request from a doctor who wished to be classified as a pain specialist, and he thought that we may be interested in such a qualification, and if so, what sort of time frame could we envisage? So I thought, this is too good an opportunity to miss. We've got to grasp this with both hands. So I wrote back saying, yes, we are interested, and I suggested a time frame of 5 years, which I know was a bit ambitious, but I didn't want to lose the opportunity.
That's, again, something which has come to pass. So a lot of seeds were sown in that transition time, developing a new college, intensive care medicine, and the beginnings of pain medicine.
To every member of the council and the previous board at the time the college was formed, I'd like to express my profound gratitude. It was an enormously satisfying experience to have everybody on side and working for the same goal, and I thank them very much for that.
Thank you, Peter, for the time you've spent talking with us today. You've been a leader in anaesthesia. You've been a leader through a significant time for the college in its creation 25 years ago. And it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, David. It's been a pleasure to be here.